Hi, my name is Christy Burns. I produce the Morning Review podcast and help coordinate the Northwest Passages Book Club events when they're live or when they're here, which is virtually. Tonight's event is really special. That's why we're starting a little late. We got talking with Sandra Tsing Loh and then also Julia Sweeney, all together here in Spokane. So I am going to show you just a little introduction about Sandra Tsing Loh.
Yay.
Composer, comedian, commentator, activist, scientist, daughter, mother, and writer, Sandra Tsing Loh.
I write stuff that's not funny, and no one likes it. So, but I value that too. And I think the gift of being able to make someone laugh, and I treasure it so much in other people, is magic, and it's great. It's an absolute good.
We should have had you here 10 times. You're so funny.
Oh my goodness.
All your writing, I really love it. And you're such a rude but true truth teller. You say it like you don't care. You let the chips fall where you may. And the new book, look at the you know it, you wrote it there.
Yes, it's here, The Mad Woman and the Vulva.
My years of raging hormones. Why are your hormones raging?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. Menopause is actually a hormonal return to where we were as preteen girls before the fertility cloud came down. We became interested in boys and hair and makeup, and cutting up little sandwiches and folding up little socks and nurturing and bonding and putting other people first. Fast forward to age 46, there you stand cutting up little sandwiches, and suddenly, as if in a dream, the fertility cloud starts to lift, and you ask yourself, why am I cutting up sandwiches for all these able-bodied people?
Adventures continue on a Roomba, as does the conversation, and why not have it with a fellow writer and friend who is on that path with you? Julia Sweeney joins Sandra Tsing Loh to continue the conversation on Northwest Passages Virtual Forum.
Yay!
Oh my God, that video made me want to cry.
I know. First of all, I'm so glad we took that picture at your show.
It was like a Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. It was like, I love Sandra. I love Julia. Oh my gosh. Thank you guys. Well done.
That was good. I felt part of it.
So we're pivoting for a moment.
Yes.
So I think it's funny we started a little late because
Yes.
Julia, you have this.
I know,
class.
and I'm sorry. Now I'm feeling
No,
so bad.
but I think it's so great.
talking.
It's such a sort of Washington State area story of just how rich these readers and writers are in this in this place.
Oh yeah, Seattle and Spokane, and really not Spokane, not as much as Seattle, but almost.
But you should say a little bit.
Great literary tradition, and they have
Yeah.
Jess Walter, one of today's best writers, who lives in Spokane.
Totally.
And they have one of the greatest bookstores ever, Auntie's Bookstore in Spokane. And I think of Spokane to me as kind of a bastion of sanity in the middle of a scary area of the world. Because you're very close to northern Idaho.
But yet there is time for contemplation and for writing, which is, I think, a little bit, we've had these conversations and we're I have said and I was such a fan of your podcast, not your podcast, your radio commentary series, First World Problems on KCRW, which we've talked about.
Oh my God, that was nothing compared to yours. Oh my God, you've been doing it for so long and so much better.
But no.
But anyway.
But of this tradition of moments of contemplation, when I think of old NPR, like NPR in the 80s and 90s, and this was before This American Life when Ira Glass was pre-This American Life. Even in the NPR News Hour, and there's so much news as we know in this national conversation that's but there was always 5 minutes before the hour where there would be a 2.5-minute commentary, by Bailey White or some just about our moments in life. that are small and
But
give us
oh my God, but Sandra, you are my inspiration for so much of this, because I've seen all your one-person shows, I've read all your books, and you are the master of the micro moment of this age, in my opinion. And this book is so wonderful in that way. Like if I was describing it to someone, which I have, I'd be like, well, oh, there's this great chapter about her front lawn and the whole problems of the front lawn, and and then the neighbor sort of this way, and then she feels this way about the lawn, and then she calls someone and they think this way. And of course I bungle it. I make it sound horrible. So I probably cause you to not sell books because I'm so bad at it. But you are so funny at that stuff. And that is such a gift. I really just love all that, from that to the massage chair to just living in this house that you can afford but not afford to fix up, and then managing your kids and then your ex and the way your ex is doing things. I mean, it was really a balm reading your book, because it just makes you think that other people have as many problems as you, and you can be funny about it.
Well, pivoting back to you, I think that we were talking about you before you got on screen, of how funny you are, and your monologues and your books and your personal stories, but are incredibly human. And your piece Older and Whiter, which it is so what I saw in that we went. It's like you can make the same to you. An ordinary day, just bickering with your daughter and your husband, of just so. These are the moments in the day
Thank
that are
God
so.
we can make something funny out of that.
Right.
And I was supposed to film that in Spokane, and now because of COVID, it's postponed probably for a year and a half. But anyway,
well, but you will, because all those moments in the day that are just the ordinary human moments, and I was like laughing.
Aww, Sandra.
Stuff that's ordinary stuff in the day, and I think that's the magic that I have admired of you.
I know, but I'm more inspired by you, because I have to say, telling it is hard. Yes, it requires its own art to tell it. You have to have more stand-up in you. You have to have more timing and landing the joke. But you really are a beautiful writer. I mean, like, that's the skill that I really wish I had. I mean, it's really beautifully crafted, your chapters. I mean, like, it's really, I'm laughing and relating, but it's also well written. And that is really rare.
Well, thank you, but back to you. I mean, you are writing constantly, and you're doing work constantly, and it's really. Well, I wonder if I would ask you, is
Yes.
part of your process getting up, you've written stuff, and then you will come with note cards, and you'll come to the groundlings, and you'll go, and there's such a beautiful, structured yet improvisatory feeling that is being.
Well, at the groundlings, I really don't come with note cards. I mean, well, it's confusing, because sometimes the groundlings has this stand-up-y nights where you would come with note cards, but for the most part, you're going to go and just improvise completely. But I do try to prepare, like Sunday, I spent the entire day, because I had a 10-minute set on the uncab, a Zoom uncab, and it went okay. That's the thing you have to realize as a writer, which like, it's just like, not everything's great, but not everything's terrible, and everything's a potential, so I decided it was Father's Day, and I would rate God of the Bible, Yahweh, against this manual of if you're dating a bad boyfriend or not, certain qualities that he might have. And I spent the entire day trying to rate Yahweh against this list of, is he controlling? Yeah. Is he jealous? Well, he says he's jealous on every page. It's like he thinks it's a good quality. But then, so I'll do stuff for that. But I'm not very disciplined like I wish I was. Like I imagine you must be. Like you really have taken these things, like reading the book, you really have taken the opportunity to grab all the details in real time and create this tableau and this story that I am not as disciplined as you or as talented to do.
Well, I think, what do those words mean? Okay, to go back, because you're very writerly and you're very thoughtful. And again, on your KCRW show in the time, like I would listen, and those commentaries were slightly longer than the ones that I would do, not by much, but by a minute or two, and they were quite writerly. And what I admire about your space is that you go in front of the audience in the groundlings, and you are just conversant in the space, and you have your cards, you have your material, but you're completely comfortable. And that's something that not many people, it's not grasping. It's just like, here's how we are. I gotta try this. And
Right.
and that experimentation is so funny, and everybody is there with you where you go, just follow me on this track.
Well,
And,
but it isn't.
and
I
you'll, and
have
you'll
to
say,
say, though,
and,
it's
and
not
my
always good.
friends told me not to do this bit. And here I go. And
You, my
very-
family often tells me that was
so
kind of funny, but not funny enough.
comfortable, but because you're so intelligent, and that's part of what is the drama and the excitement. It's like a mind where you go, okay, I can land this joke here. Let's do that. And then I also ruminated here. And my friends told me not to do this, but I'm very interested in this. And that sort of brings me back to your sort of your intelligence and your intellect, which
Oh,
then
yes.
sort of goes, and we're going to go all over the
Well,
place.
it's kind of funny because actually this morning, I actually wrote 3,000 words this morning because I'm writing a short story for the Spokane Chronicle.
Spokane.
Is it the now I'm thinking, oh my God, questions are already coming in, Sandra. It's not funny at all. My new thing is,
What were you writing about?
well, I had to write a
short
short story on the theme of Mount St. Helens erupting 40 years ago. And
Right,
I came up with the idea of a guy who is in Seattle, because I was in Seattle when Mount St. Helens erupted. I watched the eruption, and then I saw that the smoke was all heading towards Spokane, which is where I'm from. And Seattle got none of the smoke or the ash, but Spokane got everything, and northern Idaho got everything. And I imagined a story about a guy who's finally slept with the girl of his dreams that he's been flirting with for a year, who's kind of cooler than him and older than him and everything. And then he's very titillated and triumphant over this conquering of being able to sleep with this woman. But then as he thinks about it, he realizes that he's going to quit college and move back to Spokane and marry his high school sweetheart, who's a Catholic. So I guess the idea is a guy who gets too much of what he wants in the big world and decides to make other choices.
But I'm glad that the C word has come up this early, because I think that's part of, I think one of the last times we Zoomed before we were doing these more public Zooms of I have been, as you know, really fascinated by your Catholicism, earlier Catholicism. And
I'm more Catholic now in a way, except that
exactly. And in the pandemic, sort of the nunnery thing, and just the spiritual thing, and that is so interesting about comedy and humor, that it can be really sort of nested in a spiritual, thoughtful way, which doesn't make it less funny. But that's why talking to you, it's both hilarious, and then I think about it later, and I think that all your work and your monologues and your shows are equally like cancer, God, and it's funny.
It's what's happening. It's what's on TV. But wait, Sandra, we have a question. Are you ready? Because it's a good one. How long have you been writing? Okay, I'm passing. We can both answer that quickly. Leslie asks, what led you to write books about the change women go through that no one really talks about? Because in the clip, you were talking about that. And I just don't think there's, if we stopped all of culture and only had writing about women going through menopause for 50 years, we would make 5% dent into what needs to be done about women going through menopause.
Well, I love Leslie's question, and both of us have been writing, at least I've been writing I'm 58, so started a lot of years, not professional all those years. And I think with the menopause thing, it was interesting because my editor at the Atlantic for many years wanted me to write about this. I go, I'm 44, I'm 46, I don't know what it is. But then it came upon me of just this chemical change, suddenly driving on a freeway just in the usual Starbucks, Trader Joe's, Pizza Dough, whatever, United Air Miles. There's something about United Air Miles something about miles where you're looking into the abyss of like, I don't remember my PIN. I don't understand this. And that's reasonable to go into an existential crisis about this. But this was not that. And to feel that my chemicals and hormones were changing sort of right around 46, which was perimenopause. And so I think some of these things are not, and it was always a puzzle to me why that hadn't been written about, where you have Oprah and like why this wasn't
yes.
that is sort of an interesting journey of I don't know if 50 years of feminism is kind of like going, we can't admit that at any point we feel anything odd because we're still making 79 cents on the dollar. But to a certain extent, that journey of saying women feel a lot of different emotions, and so do men. So there's a little bit around this time where Robin Williams and Spalding Gray, like it's kind of like where we saw really talented men have depression and off themselves because I guess they didn't have these, touchy-feely women's ways of going, I feel I'm really cracking up. That we could all have a larger bandwidth of admitting the emotions that we have, I think. What do you think?
Also, I mean, to me, which I think is something that you touch on even in the comedic bit that we saw coming into this, is that we're so flooded with these hormones that are about mating and reproducing, all humans, mostly, not everyone, but mostly on average. And then you kind of, your head comes above water. And to me, that's menopause. So you're not saturated with these hormones anymore. And you're saying, so why did I need to make dinner every night? Like, why did I have to go, oh, what happened to you? Like all these things that are good things. Those are all good things. But you don't have to do that anymore. Like you see, you're outside of it. You can, in some ways it's more authentic because you're not doing it for a reason to ensnare or to be better or to mother or nurture. You're doing it because you're actually interested in what happened, or, and that is such a profound change. It makes me sad that men don't go through menopause. Actually, the world would be better if men went through menopause, if they just stopped having to get a young woman.
Yeah, and I guess they haven't had that. So previously they had the midlife crisis at 45 and they got the red.
I don't even know what that means though. I mean, what
but
does
it
that mean?
didn't, then we had ours, but they don't have theirs.
I guess what is a midlife crisis for a man? It's that they get a red Corvette when they're 45 and they start looking for teenage girls or girls in their 20s. That's not a midlife crisis. That's a continuation.
But I would ask you, this is a philosophical question that I don't know the answer to. So you've been in comedy many years. So do you, okay, so there's some, seems like comedians are depressives, male comedians versus female comedians. What do you have anything about humor that either would, I guess, debunk these ideas? Or, I mean, you were
stand-up is different than sketch comedy, and I was mostly a sketch comedy comedian, even though I dipped into stand-up. But especially now, this last 2 weeks, because all this crap has come out, about various male stand-up comedians and requiring women to have sex with them in order to get time on stage, and other female comedians asking their male cohorts to say something about it. And the whole week I thought, oh my God, I'm so glad I wasn't more of a stand-up. Like, cause I wouldn't have done well in that environment. I mean, like I believe them. And I think it was terrible. And when you watch a lot of these guys stand up, it is really misogynist and horrible in ways that I hope we're past that anyway. But in sketch comedy, it was more of a motley crew of communists, everybody having sex with each other. Like it wasn't, it was more of a hippie vibe than it was a patriarchal, I'm in charge and you got to do this in order to get ahead vibe. I never saw that in the Groundlings, like, you know, like, so that was a better, I would say my advice is sketch comedy is a little easier for women than men, but also it seems like stand-up comedy is changing. I hope it is, and it will get better for women. I don't know. Okay, but wait, we have another question, Sandra.
Oh, yay.
From Ellen.
Hello, Ellen.
How do people feel about including them in your work? Oh, this is a good one.
Oh, this is
your daughter's your partner. And is that Julia Sweeney, who you refer to only as Julia?
So, great question. And this is not, okay, so these characters are sort of mixtures of many other people. And so this is not exactly Julia, although I love the name Julia, so I will use it all the time. So they're mixtures.
You changed the name of your partner, for example.
I did.
In the book.
I did, because his name is actually Fryer,
Right.
which is such it's such an unusual name. It's just kind of like, but his middle name is Charles, so Charlie, and sort of like people with, like my older sister also, I just changed their names, not so that lawsuits don't happen. They may anyway, but we're these main characters I have to pick and choose because, you know, because they stand for certain things, and he's been very patient about weathering this time. But I think it is tricky, and I always get that question, and it's a great question, and I wish it were easier to answer over the years, but it's always a tricky journey. And this book was really vetted by a legal team of I think in the end, always with these sort of comic memoirs, you want to make sure the person who comes off worst is you, so that the foibles are your own, that everyone around you is relatively reasonable, and they're going, oh, come on, and you're the one that goes in these journeys. And probably that makes better comedy anyway, to have the internal narrative that goes astray. But I try to vet it, and I will say I have a relative who's a young relative who doesn't show up a lot in this. And I think that, I'm not going to say his or her take is so charming on something. There's a detail that is so charming. I said, you said this hilarious and perfect thing. Can I just say that? And this person said, no. And I used it anyway, but changed it because, so to be honest, that's a great question. Sometimes I go, you said this thing that is this one line that's so funny and amazing and seems to set off the whole decade and century, and I must put it in there. I'm going to ask your permission. They say no, and I put it there anyway. But you have to change the idea. Legally, if they're a redhead, you have to make them a brunette. If they're tall, you have to make them short. So there's a lot of legal stuff that you have to do. Good question. To change it so they can't sue you.
I feel like I feel like I have a general rule of thumb that your parents are fair game completely.
Totally.
In fact, my daughter was doing a little comedy routine about me today that I found hard to and yet I laughed heartily.
So
to
can
make a point.
we
I can
probe
take
what did she find comedic?
She's teaching coding on Zoom. She's a computer teacher in her room, and I came into Michael after I wrote my 3,000 words today, and I guess my voice was loud enough that her students could hear it. And I said, I finished this short story about a man who has sex with an older woman. It was very erotic for him, like maybe too erotic. And then he decides to marry his high school sweetheart. And she said she was online with her mother saying that just outside the camera. It was funny, I guess. Okay, so I did think I can take it. But it is hard when it comes to your kids and your spouse. Like, you get older, your parents are dead. And you can't keep making fun of them.
Older and whiter, it was like they both come across as just very patient, very witty, Right.
Yes, I created them to be that way, by the way. I'm protecting them. But yeah, it's hard. And I think that's why I'm moving towards fiction, actually. I
Really,
have to
you tell.
say, I loved writing this short story so much, which of course is not even based on a real person, but just an imaginary thing that I observed in others. And I had so much fun writing it. It felt like I'd been let out of prison. Like I could write about anything. Now, I don't know if I'm a very good fiction writer since this was my first time, but I had so much fun writing it that I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing for the rest of my life, which is a big overstatement. But that is not a small question, Ellen, because I don't want to portray people badly. I don't want people to think I'm using them for my art, which of course I am. And I'm not trying to, I don't want people to think I'm using them for comedic relief, even though I am. And it just seems like it's really hard. I've never really resolved it. It's been always an issue. I'm always either trying to protect someone or make them seem better than they were, or seeing if somebody I think is a strong-willed person is willing to take, has a good enough sense of humor that I can say that about them or that. Like, there's something, you are constrained. I feel like I'm in chains a little bit with that. Yeah.
But when you were writing this morning in this fictional flow, so what was, because I began as a fiction writer, and I loved sort of writing plays, and eventually in these sort of writing workshops, I just got more and more they said, don't write in first person. And then I did. And then that was the stuff that people more responded to.
Right, because it's so immediate.
But I don't know that I loved writing it more than fiction. And I began writing plays because I thought nothing would be more delightful than to write it and have people do it, like, as opposed to.
Yeah, no, I think that's true.
But in your flow this morning,
my one day,
what did that feel like? So I'm thinking when I write, I just remember an incident of the day, and that gives me energy of how irritated I was and blah. But when you're writing fiction, what was the pleasure of the flow?
Okay, first of all, I have to do a shout out for the Great courses. I don't know if you know that thing, but they have a short story class that I'm taking, and I think the teacher is J. Annie McLeod or something. Anyway, I've only watched 13 of the 24 half-hour lectures about writing short stories. But she gives you certain tasks in each episode, and probably half of them I do, and half of them I just go on to the next episode because I don't want to do that task. And but some I do. So I was using it to give, like, I had to write down words I wanted to be in it, and metaphors and feelings. Like, every episode has a different thing, and it actually felt like I was let out of jail this morning when I was writing it. It was so heady. Now, I will say this, I don't know if it's any good. I'm not going to say it's bad or good. It still needs an enormous amount of work. But I felt set free by writing fiction. Like, oh my God, how did I not discover this 20 years ago? Like, this is really fun. Now, it might, because I also personally respond to first-person narratives. Like, I'd be more likely to read your book because I believe what you're telling me is true, or at least close to true. Like, there is something about thinking that it really happened, and the immediacy of it and the truthfulness of it that is something you can't get in fiction. Like, but there is a freedom in fiction that is so heady and so visceral and so palpable, and my ideas started flooding. Like, I have all these things I've written about. Like, I was working for a long time on a one-person show called I As Well, which I think you saw a version of, that
Love
was
it.
the Me Too movement, and I could never crack the nut of it. But now I realize I can write it as fiction. Like, and maybe no one will read it, but artistically, I think it's freedom for me. So I would say the family question is not small. It's a huge question. I wrestle with it constantly, and I want to be done with it. I want to break free of it, because I really like when Mulan was making fun of me for coming out and talking about my short story while her class could hear it. To me, that's her right to do that, but I don't feel like I can do that about her.
You've said 10 interesting things. I made some notes. So
Okay.
now I will respond.
Even though this is supposed to be about you,
No,
Sandra.
no, I think we're talking about writing because this is
Okay.
Spokane
Yeah.
and this is happening. These are
Okay.
readers, these are writers.
Yeah.
We're just
Okay.
talking writer to writer. You know, what is interesting is there can be something really freeing and fantastic about being in a structured writing situation. And I think in Los Angeles, we have the Robert McKee story structure class
Right.
that my agent made me take. And it was so fantastic for me of hearing about the hero's journey because I was lost in all of my books. All of my books are first person, et cetera, et cetera. They seem to be wandering journeys, but they're all structured the same way.
Right.
And when you are freed by learning that story structure, and I love this thing that every story is the hero rides into the forest to slay the dragon. Halfway there, he realizes back home, his village is burning. Call it a she. That's every story structure of the modern
but
time.
this class would redefine the hero's journey as, okay, now I'm going to mangle her word, but I think it's the epiphant story, which means that your main character is going to have an epiphany at some moment. Like, forget about plot. Don't even think about plot. Think about the epiphany that is going to happen, that's going to transform your character's life, and then kind of backtrack into that epiphany.
Totally. And that's another way, because the epiphany, I think it's that even if your hero or heroine or the they character is depressed on page 1, there has to be some energy in terms of where they think they're going. But halfway through or 2/3 of the way through, they realize they're going on the wrong mission. They've forgotten something. It's my mother, it's my dad. And so I think the epiphany, that still works also. And so I think that that sometimes in this modern day and age, we're a little bit in the memoir category. There's a feeling of kind of like, if I just feel it and my story is important, it should come really easily. And that it's almost, they've said almost like therapy, that writing programs are like therapy, that we just say but in fact, there's a lot of structure and craft to it. Even if you're telling a very emotive journey, and that's been since St. Augustine's time on, and that structure and craft can be freeing rather than sitting there every morning and going, am I feeling it today? And most of the time you're not. And so you have to kind of...
By the way, St. Augustine's City of God, his memoir, he doesn't talk that much about his girlfriend who had a couple of kids by him that he left to go pursue Jesus. I want to read her autobiography. I would like to see her side of the story. How great was it that he discovered Jesus? Okay.
Well, exactly. And
wait. Now we have another question.
Okay.
Jessie, listening to you talk like old friends, true. You don't seem like a mad woman. Well, I never said that. Is that a part of you or just a persona to wrap a humorous book around? Oh, this is your question, Sandra.
Oh my, and my partner's watching. No, I think I would say I'm one of many artistic people who go from like highly functional to highly not functional. And but I think part of the writer's thing, it's weird because I think you and I might share this because you're a performer, of being both an introvert and an extrovert, of like, we can perform, but we then have to go back and then feel self-loathing about what happened, and then report on stage that we felt the self-loathing. So going back and forth between these stages is kind of a journey. It can be sort of hard on the people that we live with when you go, I got it. And I have 6 planets in Aquarius, which is a chore, where you go, I'm always, I got it. I've solved it. We're going to do this and that. And then the next day is kind of like, I can't get out of bed because that was so ridiculous. And so I think it really does vary on that. And it's Jesse, that's the kind phrase. I just want to go back for a moment because I had another thought when you were talking earlier that I want to catch up on. When you're talking about, and thank you, Jesse, and I will go back to the madness of reading fiction and reading memoir. And a favorite book of mine has always been Ford Madox Ford, The Good Soldier. So, and that's a novel, and that is in a voice. Some of the novels are in a certain voice, and I would say Jonathan Ames, The Extra Man. Why I'm attracted to novels of people with men with ambiguous sexuality. But I just think the voice in Ford Madox Ford, The Good Soldier, and Jonathan Ames, The Extra Man, on page 1, you start reading, and I will go down that journey. So like Jonathan Ames, the Extra Man, it seems to be a memoir about my life. Obviously it isn't, but I relate it to so many things. So sometimes for me, it's not necessarily whether it happened or not, but sometimes voice really gets me.
Well, it is really great to read somewhere you go, oh, I identify with this person. I feel like what they're saying is what I could be saying. Like you hear their voice and it's partly your voice, like that's a real, ego booster and a confidence booster. It should be, because you can say, yeah, okay, obviously it's not 100% your voice, but it's enough of your voice that you feel like if this person can do it, then why can't I do it? And that is a great thing when you find that.
No, and I will add to that. I mean, we're certainly in this pocket of time that's a national conversation about racial inequity. So much stuff is coming to the fore right now. And to a certain extent, in arts communities, there's kind of a, BIPOC people of color and identifying in certain ways. And I think I've been having internal conversations with people of like, sometimes to me, voice is voice, and sort of growing up, I never said, where is the Asian American lady saying what? Like, voice can be found, and I think that's part of the complexities of art. Voice can be found anyway.
Well, it's interesting because this book that I was telling you about, the book club, we're reading Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin this session. And the book is written by James Baldwin, obviously a gay Black man, writing in the voice of a 6'4" blonde white guy. So it's a really interesting question. Like, can you write in the voice of people from other cultures or other races? And I think you can. I think it's wrong to make people feel self-conscious about doing it. I mean, you can do it well or not well, or you can not understand or whatever. But anyway, that's a really interesting topic. And I had described a book that I was thinking, or actually it was a screenplay I was thinking of writing, and there were Native Americans in it. And I had someone say, well, you can't write that because you're not a Native American. And then I was spooked by it. I was thrown by it. Like, I felt like, oh yeah, I can't have a Native American character in it because that I don't. But now I feel like reading Giovanni's Room was like, well, I think I can. I mean, if I do enough research and I'm empathetic as much as I can, I mean, anyway, it's complicated, very complicated. Wait, another question's come in. Okay, Kay asks, for both of you, what are you working on next? Looking forward to seeing Older and Wider eventually. Yes, I'm hoping. My goal is that on my birthday 2021, I film it in Spokane, which is October 2021. Both of you write so much. Will it be another play or one-woman show? Are you being creative over this challenging time? Well, I've already answered that. I'm writing a short story for the Spokesman-Review.
I want to also, that reminds me, great question. I want to dial back to when you were speaking earlier about the various forums. And I think when you're talking about me also, was that?
I as well.
I also. That's such a great piece. And there's so much in there. Although we're in a particular time with sort of tweeting and showing up and being this, that it can be so politicized, one person saying something out of context. So it's
Oh, I
almost
know.
tricky time to do solo work because you can
Yeah.
have a show that's a full context of a 90-minute show. And if there's one sentence that's said out that,
Yeah, if they can pull something out.
and I certainly have experienced that in work. I'm trying to have a dialogue with the audience and saying, well, here's an argument about how I would think, but obviously I was wrong, and you guys will think that. And it's just tricky to do the solo.
It's really awful. It's this, I call it the new Victorianism. It's this kind of like, oh, you've said something we are offended by.
Right.
Oh, the vapors, I'm so offended. Like, it's really, I actually now think it's just, especially now that we have COVID and the protests, there's so many things have happened since although people are still being canceled, obviously. And there's still people out there looking for you to say one wrong thing and one wrong phrase so they can take you down. But I have to believe that's a passing thing. I mean, at least I hope that's true. I mean, it's so absurd. It's so absurd. I mean, it's so not the way to get the best art and the best comedy and the best anything. On the other hand, guys who required female comics to give them blowjobs in order to get stage time at stand-up places, am I sad that they're being canceled? No.
Right, but that's not really.
But that's not the same. But
that's
yeah,
not really
it
comparable
is
to doing a full-fledged 90-minute thoughtful show if you're a female and thought it through to be canceled at that same. It's just
even
where
into
we're at.
today, because like I have a Twitter account that doesn't even have that many followers, but some amount of followers, and I am scared to comment on some things. I'm thinking twice about weighing in on this or that because I just think
No,
I'm
and I think
kind of a
language
coward
can
about
be
it.
really excerpted right now, and I was working on a personal essay for a major news outlet that has been killed because the New York Times, because you can't say the word fat. You can't say my fat pants because that they go.
And then fat pants are a big part of everyone's life.
But because the anti-body shaming folks will take it off on Twitter, so cut that lot. So there is a lot of that right now, and that may be necessary for our times, but it is tricky. So hence, in terms of what are we working on, it's like, could it be a solo show? Could it be this and that or the other? I mean, I certainly have been writing about stuff that's happened during the pandemic quarantine, but we're
Have
still.
you? I'm so glad you are, because this is so crazy and I haven't been writing anything about it.
Right, but where you put like it's and there's a certain where you go, I'm writing, it's not out there yet, it may, and I'm writing on it.
Because also, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we don't know. You can't really put anything out now. I feel bad. There's all these TV shows. I have a lot of TV show friends who are writers who are now have gotten the word from the network. You've got to include COVID into your storyline. Like, how do you even write about that? And
to a certain extent, in the life of writers, which I think there should be a stand for that, there's a little bit of a time where I'm thinking about younger people who've grown up in this time. There is a space to be able to write and maybe not put it out for a while.
Yeah.
And let it stew. And you don't have to tweet so it comes back at you or whatever, and let it stew for a while.
I have to say, for me, I think I'm done with the one-person shows. Like, I want to film Older and Wider in Spokane at the Fox Theater. I'm committed to doing that.
I'll be
but then I feel like done. And the COVID quarantine has taught me that, because what I've realized is it's so much effort to do stage shows. It's so much energy and effort to do it. And of course, there's the great feeling when it goes well and people are clapping, and that is great. And you can't replace it with anything, and you'll miss it forever and blah, blah, blah. But it's such a huge energy sink, the performance part of it, that I would rather just be writing in my office and trying to make my writing as good as I can. That's how I feel right now. That's what the quarantine has taught me. I want to be a writer, and leave it to the young people to go around to the clubs and rent the place and put down the deposit and do an ad and make sure there's so many seats and land the jokes and talk to everyone after and blah, blah, blah. I'm done.
Yeah. I love it. Even as you say that, completely agreeing with you, I'm also completely disagreeing with you, because seeing you perform live is one of the fantastic life
Okay, well, I did it.
experiences. And yeah, and we may go, because I deal with this all the time. I'm like 58, and it's kind of like, it's like the menopause lady, and it is kind of exhausting to get out and you do, but to see, and I just have to throw down comfortably from my living room, sitting on my butt in a chair. So, I don't have to like do anything to do this, but it's kind of like, it's such a pleasure to see you live, and it's an unusual pleasure, and it's a distinct pleasure, and it's a unique pleasure to have someone start talking about where we all are and go down this journey. It's actually kind of amazing, and experience that you get nowhere else. It's kind of like where if you open Netflix or Hulu, it's kind of like explosions, young dudes, some sexy young girls, and a sea creature.
Well, there are some older people who are doing stage shows, but, and of course, never say never, but I just think, first of all, I think you have to have this, okay, now this is going to get me in trouble, but I think you have to have a level of narcissism to keep doing the stage show stuff that I like to think I do not have. I mean, like, maybe I do have it and I won't be able to stand it, but it's a long way to go and a lot of energy to get those great nights. And there are great nights, but holy shit, I just look at the young people and I go at it. Okay, I think I can learn to accept that I did what I could at the time. And now that I'm taking the Great Courses short story class, I feel like I can pivot to a more appropriate thing for someone in their 60s.
But I must add, it is a little bit of this particular time that we're in, as we begin to wrap up our hour. And it was, okay, just take, and I'm going to take a little bit of a long view.
Okay,
so
yes, okay, do.
Fran Lebowitz, the great humor writer, who wrote exactly 2 books, I believe, in the 80s, and then has
had a whole career
dined out on that
years afterwards.
Yeah. So somehow and the rest of us are like hacking away. It's like, oh my God. It's like, oh my gosh, in these book tours where you there is nothing given to you. You have to, where they'll go, okay, we had a marketing meeting, we have a great plan. Sandra, make a viral 20-second video that has 20 minutes.
Yeah. Like, that's always a good plan. Who would have thought of that? A viral 20-second video. What an incredible idea.
I'm very happy with I'm very grateful to all the people who published me, but there's just a particular time, and much has been written about it, about the democratization of the arts, et cetera, so you just have to hustle harder and book it yourself. But we're going, I'm 60, should I do this? So there's that, and that is understandable, but it is still a blessing, and that's part of what I'm interested in, of just these stories of folks, and like I say, women 45 to 65. America's
oh my God, when you look at the history of literature, even taking the short story class, which I will just continually circle back to, the number of men who have been doing this compared to women. And when short stories in America started, it was Harriet Beecher Stowe, and it was women's magazines, and they were writing about women's issues. And then, as with everything, also in movies, people could start really making money off it. And when that happened, all of a sudden it was Jack London and, William Faulkner. And then women weren't even brought up in the short story classes or the novels anymore. All the women that were writing at the beginning were just out. And now I'm just appalled at the lack of, there's a lot of women writing fiction now, but my God, there just needs to be so many more, and so many more like you and I, just talking about the experiences of getting older, and it's really unfair what's happened in the culture, like what high literature is, what high, like short story writing is, and even monologues, even in the monologue arena, who is remembered? Like, it's, yeah, damn it. Anyway.
We persist. And there's
We
Christine.
persist. Yay, because writing needs to be done.
Yes.
This needs to be read. Your stories tonight were so awesome. Hanging out with you was a blast.
Oh.
This book, If It's Not One Thing, It's Your Mother by Julia Sweeney, is also available at Auntie's.
Auntie's the best bookstore in all the land.
Oh, it truly one of the greatest
I'm not
bookstores.
kidding. One of my fantasies is to move to Spokane and every Saturday just go work for free at Auntie's, wandering around telling people what books they should buy.
They're watching, Julia. They're watching. They will hold.
Oh, that would be great.
Wouldn't that be the best?
It would be an awesome job. It
You
would
know
be an
what
awesome
you should
job.
be reading.
But the thing is there is actually also a button where we're watching that you can just link and buy this book right there. But Julia, thank you for being our Spokane connection to hosting Sandra Tsing Loh, Mad Woman in the Roomba, My Year of Domestic Mayhem. Submitting questions today got you a chance to win a copy of the book. So Joyce and Leslie, I have your emails. I will be emailing you for information. You both get a copy of her fabulous book, The Mad Woman and the Roomba. You can buy copies, as we said, at Auntie's. There's a link on the page that takes you right there. All of our videos and discussions are archived on our video site, which you can access for free. We could sell tickets, but we aren't. If you feel compelled to buy a ticket, take that cash and instead make a contribution to the Community Journalism and Civic Engagement Fund via the Anovia Foundation. We appreciate your support. Thank you.
Oh.